Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Joining us now is Julie Abraham. She's Chief Executive of Richer Sounds, the home entertainment retailer with shops across the country, and Mariana Mazzucato, an economist who's written about recovery from the pandemic. Let me start with you, Julie Abraham. What sort of day have you had today? Do you know?
Yes, we've had a very good day in the shops today. We feel there's been a lot of pent-up demand of people actually just waiting for the shops to reopen so they can come in for demonstrations and to look at the product and just get out of the house.
I suppose
so we're quietly confident.
I suppose the difficulty is whether people will have much money to go further than the first burst.
That is a concern, but and sadly, that's going to be true for a lot of people. As your previous piece said, there's been 190,000 jobs lost in retail. But equally, there's a lot of people that haven't been able to go out to the pubs on holidays and go shopping for the last 12 months. So there could be some pent-up spending in there, and that could last a while. People aren't going to be able to travel abroad easily this year. So with staycationing and a lot of people doing houses up, we hope from our particular sector that we may benefit from that.
Mariana Mazzucato, how do you read the actual recovery of the pandemic? I mean, a quick burst at the front and then just sort of slightly slide off, or what?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you think about the macroeconomic context, we have interest rates which are, remain at rock bottom levels. We have a stimulus program, like many other countries. They differ, but there is a fiscal stimulus, unlike in other periods. The recent history of the UK was one more of austerity. And we also have savings that have been accumulated and now can, in theory, be unlocked to spend. But what we really need to be asking ourselves is the shape of the recovery. We don't want to bounce back to the same old economy that we had, which was, filled with both inequality, a financialized corporate sector, and also a lot of, the problem with the financial sector itself, where a lot of the finance ended up back into the financial sector. We have to ask how long this recovery will last. Is it just a short-term blip, or is it a long-run recovery? And we also need to ask who will benefit. And on the last point, if we just even look at the savings, like this famous pot of savings that's out there to spend, most of that is actually currently in middle and higher income households, which actually have a lower propensity to spend. So those who've been hit hardest in this health pandemic are those that actually haven't had this massive, savings pool that has increased. So we have to really be very careful. And the other thing is, in some countries, for example, in France, the recovery itself has tried to design a kind of social compact with business. So for example, both Air France and Renault, their own recovery, the recovery funds they had access to, were actually conditional on them lowering or committing to lower their carbon emissions. In this country, we haven't done that. We've given kind of big bailouts to companies like EasyJet, no conditions attached. So this idea of building back better, the slogan that's out there, we really need to ask ourselves, how can we design within the system a true building back better so that the poorest, people actually have higher incomes, but also that we get a better economy, a more sustainable and a more inclusive economy.
Right. Well, Julie Abraham, I could see you nodding quite enthusiastically at the beginning of the professor's outline of what was going on. But I'm just wondering, I mean, in the long term, can you keep as many branches as you have now? Are you expecting the business to contract a bit, or are you actually thinking we're going to be steady as she goes?
I'd like to think we're going to be steady. We've weathered all sorts of storms in the past. We have closed one store. We have no plans to close any others. I do feel we've got a bit of a niche product where people do want to see it and try it and look at it before they take it home. So I think that plays to our strengths. But I think I'd like to see a steady return to normal, and a steady return to business, and hopefully with the people going back to the high street and getting out of their houses, we will be able to survive in the long run. And I've got every confidence that we'll be able to do that. It's
presumably quite useful for you, for England, to have a little bit of a front run at this, and then to pick up the other bits of Britain.
Yes, it gives us a good test, but I think England have done a phenomenal job on the government have done a phenomenal job on their support so far, and the rollout of the vaccine programme has been nothing short of amazing. So that's certainly helped us, and we'll be ready to open in Scotland and Wales as soon as we're allowed to.
has shopping gone online to such an extent that it won't be coming back?
Well, we saw in the last, between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2, it was 80-20 in favour of the shops before the pandemic. And as soon as lockdown 1 started, it was in the opposite direction. By the time we got to November, just before the second lockdown, we were back to about 70-30 in favour of the shops. Interestingly, today, I saw our numbers, and again, it was 70% in favour of the shops. Now, I think that's going to be a little bit short term. I think it will be a slower burn and take a bit of time to build. I don't think we'll be going back to the 80-20 split of before, but I'd certainly like to get back to 70% to the stores and 30%, not just online, but we have telesales as well. So we call them the non-retail departments.
And just in the last 20 seconds, Professor Mazzucato, are we going to go back to where we were before, or are we going to be in a different place from then on?
I think we always need to ask ourselves the big question about long-term growth. What do we know that actually determines that? So just the fact that we've actually just halved the science research budget for universities, leaving a £2 billion hole in the research funding overall, that's a huge problem. That specific factor is a key driver of productivity and long-term growth. And you could look across the board and ask ourselves how Brexit, by the way, is going to affect all this. It's not only that Brexit lowers a business investment, which it does, because what investment is driven by is the perception of future market opportunities, and the size of our market has just fallen immensely. Right. Also the pots of money from the European Investment Bank, the Horizon program in Europe, and so on. This does leave actually an investment, a long-term investment hole, and that's what drives long-term GDP.
Mariana Mazzucato, Julie Abraham, thank you both very warmly for joining us. Thank you.